Okay, I don't know if anybody on the panel has questions for each other. We've seen three remarkably convergent approaches to the explanatory gap here.
Yeah.
Can I? I've got things I'd like to ask both, but Tony, I'm just confused. I'm a bit confused by the metaphysics of your view. So, like those two, you describe those two worlds, A and B, one in which there's determinism and one in which there isn't. And it looks like it ought to be an objective fact about the world whether determinism is true or not. But it looks on your view like it's dependent on how we conceptualize the world, whether determinism is true or not. That seems kind of wrong to me.
No, I think determinism's true, but I don't think it applies. It's not a system that you can use when you're interacting with someone else. So then you move into a different mode. Kind of, you might think of it as a rather like, if we're interacting with someone, we would predict and we use different heuristics to understand how we should interact with them. And so that's where that framework is no longer useful, because your own responses are going to be picked up by the other person you're interacting with them. So then determinism may well be true, but it's not the framework that is with the heuristics that are useful to guide your interaction.
So now it sounds like it's just an illusion, the way we conceive of the world from the phenomenal stance. It's illusory, because we think it makes us conceive of a non-deterministic world, and the world is determined. I don't know.
Well, I don't think it's an illusion to realize that the principles of determinism and science aren't going to guide your interactions with someone else very effectively. But yes, it may seem, I mean, certainly there are formulations that will make it seem like an illusion. And so I think it's a mistake to imagine that you should try and cash out the free will phenomenal and the notion of a soul, all of which in some sense I believe in, but to cash them out in terms of a mechanistic framework.
Right.
So let me come back at you, because I really liked your start, where you said, well, Descartes started like this, and indeed, Descartes stripped out these. He came from Aristotle, and he got rid of, this idea of the final. I forget the details. Okay, but anyway, and in that way he helped. He ushered in the scientific revolution and allowed biology to really take off. I actually think that Descartes had a real insight in realizing that there was something there that needed to be preserved, right? So I think it was certainly a mistake in my view, to imagine it was still there and should interact through the pineal gland. So here's where I depart from you. I wonder, why do you, if you're going to say that there's this other aspect to nature, why are you so concerned about its physical properties, its extension, its causal properties? I mean, you're just playing into the scientist's hands, as it were. I mean, if you're going to say it's not physical, say it's not physical.
Well, but I want to really believe in it. I want a unified picture. So, I mean, I still haven't done, it seems on your view, the only way, I'm inclined to interpret your view as phenomenology doesn't really exist. It's like this stance we can, use to interpret people. It works very well. But the world isn't really like that. I mean, the world is evolved.
It's just like wave-particle duality. I mean, both are true. I mean,
you said determinism wasn't true.
Sorry?
You said determinism wasn't true.
Right, but, well, okay, I don't think determinism, I think, determinism is true, I said. Right, indeterminism isn't true, right? But,
yeah. Sorry.
But that's an overarching theory. I still think that there is a sense in which it is true, and indeed, I think, a very important truth that souls exist, that moral truths exist, that people have phenomenal states.
So just, it's interesting. I mean, I suppose maybe there's a different conception of what metaphysics is all about in the background here. I mean, yes, I don't think consciousness is physical, but I think it's a real concrete part of the world. We've got this real concrete phenomenon, consciousness, and then we've got these facts about causal structure, and I believe in both, and I want a unified picture that incorporates both.
And I kind of agree with you, and I think, we live in a world that's so dominated by a materialistic scientific worldview, we think that the only way we can call something real is to say that it's got all these physical properties. But why play into that? I think actually that's a sort of strategic mistake.
Well, I suppose at root I find your view unintelligible. If you really believe in phenomenology and there's one world out there, and we want to work out what it's like. I mean, And I mean, I just can't make sense of this, that there are just two different stances, but they're somehow...
Well, I like the articulation Stephen Jay Gould gave in his non-overlapping magisteria, and that's probably more elegant than I can state it.
I mean, are the souls or aren't there? Is the determinism true or isn't there? Are the phenomenal properties or...
The souls,
it's like relativism or something.
But they're souls, but they're thoroughly non-physical, right? No, they don't have any physical properties at all. They certainly don't have extension and causal properties.
So you're just a substance
But they
dualist?
exist.
So you're just a substance dualist? You're a substance dualist?
No, because substance is a physical concept, isn't it? I mean...
It's a metaphysical concept. It's a concept of a thing that has properties. I mean, I just can't find a view into the middle way between saying substance dualism and, intentional stance where it's really an illusion.
Well, this is really fun, but we're hogging too much time. We can argue over a drink.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, general questions. Pete here.
I have a question to Dr. Jack. Did you mean to call Dr. O'Regan a psychopath? Because I think indirectly that's what you have done. Now, there is research that about 30% of people don't see first-person perspective as really deeply different. Do you want to call all the 30% of people psychopaths?
I mean, I think that people who are completely unable to see the first-person perspective are likely to be suffering from some serious interpersonal problems. Whether you want to exactly call it psychopathy or not, I'm happy with that label. I think I was very clear that I'm not applying this to academics and I had a slide for that effect, because I think that when your reasoning is being driven by a whole bunch of intellectual considerations, it becomes much less likely that it's just the sorts of intuitive pulls that I imagine to be the things that are pushing the opinions in my less educated undergraduates or less conversant with this issue undergraduates. Very well educated, the ones who go to my classes, yeah, right.
It's a question for Kevin. I'm really sympathetic to the project to make qualia, kind of take them out of the epiphenomenal camp that seems very popular nowadays. So I really think it's very important to integrate them in the causal order of the world. I even accept that you might be able to describe laws of interaction with objects whereby if I instance such a law, I would have to be experiencing a red quale. Okay, so I'll go with you that far. But it seems to me it's another step to say that all there is to that red quale is such interaction. It's one thing to say that a quality is constrained by its causal profile. It's quite another thing to say that all it is a set of, as it were, relational, dispositional, a profile. So I wonder why you want to take that extra step. What motivates you to do that?
I think you have to be as extreme as possible and to see how far the argument goes. So it seems to me that if there were more, you would be back to the explanatory gap. If there were more, in what terms would you explain it?
Dave, can I follow on this?
Sure.
Where it really struck me as unintuitive to me, how that the scheme could explain everything was when you started talking about emotions. And I felt jealous that embarrassment was so low on the scheme of experience for you. But sorry that love and joy and excitement were also so low. But look, it seems to me that emotions are incredibly salient, right? And I noticed that you kind of in this arrow that went up, you said sensory phenomenal experience. And so, again, coming back to how well can you explain everything for that particular class, which I think really puts pressure on this point of whether you can fully explain everything about them by the qualities you mentioned.
Yeah, because my whole theory was about sensory experiences.
Right.
What I mean is like the 5 classic sense modalities. And maybe if we could go further and incorporate emotions in it, but then we would need additional mechanisms, I think, that we would have to build in. But I think it would be possible. For example, what characterizes emotions is that they're accompanied by physical manifestations in the body, which normal sensations are not accompanied by. And I think adding that in For example, I have another concept I call automaticity, which maybe you might invoke for pain, for example. If you stick your finger in the fire, well, your finger just jerks back automatically. So this is another objective fact about certain modes of interaction that you have with the world. Emotions, for example, objectively modify maybe your heart rate and your galvanic skin response and stuff like that. If you incorporate these additional factors into it, then I would hope that with the same approach, you could, again, completely describe the emotions.
So just very briefly back on that, the only concern I have about that is that the areas involved in sensory motor are anti-correlated with the areas that are involved in awareness of emotion. And you see this pattern that one set activates when the other deactivates. So that makes me a little bit skeptical that sensory motor properties are going to help to explain.
Well, no, I mean, as I said, the notion of action in this theory really only becomes important at the top right-hand corner of that diagram. That's why the emotions are lower down, because action is not so involved.
Right.
Sure.
Yes, question for Philip. You mentioned simplicity and elegance at the beginning as an advantage, but then it seems like you get very, very complex here at the end, and I'm wondering whether the rug is just bumped up elsewhere in the theory. And second point, just to throw it in, I'm not sure how this is an empirical task or how empirical results really relate back to the structure. It seems like that, and even this kind of what laws are consistent, is purely in the realm of sort of formal or metaphysical. And so I don't see how this ties into empirical stuff at all.
Can you, I didn't get the second part of the question.
How is your view constrained by empirical results at all?
So I don't see why there's going to be complexity necessarily. So, it's still up there. What we've got to work out within this framework is, what the laws work out sort of hopefully simple laws of nature, which make it the case that there are many regions of a functioning brain that are occupied by all and only the same universals, and that which universals are is determined by the structural properties of the whole brain. But I don't see what kind of a priori reason we have to think that those laws couldn't end up being quite simple. I mean, theory of consciousness is hard. Everyone has that kind of difficulty, but I don't see in principle why this shouldn't end up with some kind of simple laws that predict that.